don't. It's not something we leap to do. But Holder's statement, I think, is again makes the point that he blames America first, and he clearly too is of the same sort of countercultural ethos.
Good afternoon, Dr. Steele. My name is Mitch. I'm a second year at the School of Public Policy. Thank you for being with us today. There's a faculty member at the School of Public Policy who's working on a book that contrasts Barack Obama with Ronald Reagan that will be released in time for the 2012 election. Unfortunately, he's not visible to students, so he's not here today. The students can't see him because he's on sabbatical. But I want to challenge you. A bit. And this particular faculty member is a specialist in the area of foreign policy. So let's move to that arena. You said that President Obama continued the foreign policy objectives of the Bush administration. I wanted to challenge you a bit on that. With the START treaty with Russia and the troop withdrawals in the Middle East, it seems that those are two instances that at least come to mind readily that are contrary to the President Bush's objectives. So in light of those developments, how would you provide additional support to sustain your point that President Obama's foreign policy objectives were a continuation of President Bush's? Thank you.
Well, what I meant to say is that, and this is always, I think, the case. When we're talking about foreign policy, particularly, presidents only have about this much room to move. Once things are in place, we are at war in two different fronts, two different countries. Then there we are. And so it seemed to me, even again during the campaign, that Obama was being silly when he was talking about, I'm going to get out of Iraq and we're going to just basically run home. Because once you're actually in the office, as he now is, he's behaving very similarly to George W. Bush. He's basically following the same broad, there are exceptions, but the same broad policy outlines that he found about that much room to move, just like George W. Bush did. What I just quickly add to that, my criticism is that there's no foreign policy vision from Obama at this point. I don't know what we never really hear what role he wants America to play on the foreign stage.
Dr. Steele, as a kind of a expansion of the same topic, I think an American president's power, because his commander-in-chief is in the area of foreign policy, it's not in the area of domestic policy. Congress does that. And I think Barack Obama's interest is in the domestic side, not the foreign policy side. That's why he's kind of ignored it and gone into an arena that really belongs to Congress. And I think that with the czars and the direction he's going now, is going to create a great rift between the president and Congress. Would you agree?
Because
because that's his interest. I think his focus and personal interest is more domestic change.
Yes.
And the foreign policy, I think, to him is more of a nuisance. It's something he'd rather not do. I think that the two wars is something that he has very little interest in, just simply just doing what he has to do. And I'm seeing around the world with trade and everything else that he's not as focused as other presidents have been, where his interest in domestic side is very strong. The healthcare thing, for example, is an example of that. And I think that after this election, that he's going to try to use regulatory agencies and the czars to push his agenda, which will weaken Congress and probably cause pretty good conflict.
Yes, I would pretty much agree with that. Yeah, he does not seem to be interested in foreign affairs, which, that's, kind of a luxury for a president. I mean, he should be. He should have a vision. He should know what he wants to, what role we need to be playing in the world. He should be pursuing that, and he's not. And that's what makes us weak, I think. Yes.
Obama's clearly chosen to put his foot down on Israel's neck in support of the Arab countries. You don't feel that he's a Muslim. Could you tell me where you think his love for the Arab world supersedes his dislike of Israel?
I agree with basically with what you're saying. He seems to be very indifferent to, sure he would not say that, but he certainly seems to be indifferent toward the fate of Israel at this point in time, and I think his vague thinking may simply be that the Muslim world now has this clear extremist element and so forth. And I think his thinking in a vague sense may simply be, I want to sort of appease that world. Then I'll be able to make that problem go away. Again, I don't know that he thinks that because he doesn't tell us very, very clearly what he thinks, but it seems that he wants to somehow make a point of being open to the Muslim world and supportive of the Muslim world. And it may be that his bargaining chip in that strategy is Israel. And I think it's too strong to say that he's offering Israel up as a kind of appeasement to the Muslim world. Yet, there's something to that, I think. And I think that Israel has much to be concerned about with Obama as the president. He just, again, it's sort of part of one of those long alliances that we've always had. It's been an expression of the United States and our foreign policy. It's the only democracy in the Middle East, so forth. But you never hear that kind of talk, that sort of rhetoric from the president, from President Obama. I think it's a profound weakness in his foreign policy, and jeopardizes much of what we stand for as a nation.
Blame America First was a Jeane Kirkpatrick
Yes.
speech from, was it 1984? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, she wrote The Myth of Moral Equivalence. And that was really the turning point in Ronald Reagan's understanding of the Cold War and how to win. And that is an extremely important concept in terms of where we are today in our foreign policy. And the fact that this concept of redeeming a bad nation as opposed to this very clear vision that did occur during that era. Could you please, especially for the younger group here, could you please give a little bit of insight on that and how that plays out with respect to her question about Israel, with respect to the current war, Afghanistan, Pakistan, because it really is a fundamental lacking that has determined the lack of foreign policy vision.
Yes. You're talking about this, Jeane Kirkpatrick, what's the name of that essay? Very famous essay. But anyway, she talks about moral equivalency and the danger of this idea that Israel is, to use an example, is the same as Syria. No, it isn't. It's not the same as Syria. Israel is a first world nation. Israel is if you think about this applies to American exceptionalism as well. Western civilization has had a magnificent, unparalleled evolution over the last 2,000 years, from the Middle Ages, through the Renaissance, through the Enlightenment, where we put reason into play with God and said, God, that reason prevails. We then developed science out of that. We developed ideas of democracy, of freedom, of individualism. So you have all of this magnificent human evolution, fought for and won oftentimes through war, but evolution nevertheless, then you have a society where none of that has happened. There hasn't been that kind of moral evolution. And these societies have a difficult time with things like democracy. They tend to be more tribal in their focus. Authority is handed down atavistically through the divine right of kings still. That's where they're at. Well, to have a foreign policy then that says that this society with all this evolution is the same morally as this society here with none of it, is a formula that endangers us, because it puts us in a position where we're propping up people in societies that need to evolve, rather than demanding that they evolve and that they grow, and that they have for example, in Islam, that they go through a reformation, as the Christian world did several centuries ago. And again, where reason is brought to bear, faith is not everything. Well, so when you start to just say that Israel is the same as Syria and so forth, then you have a blind, mindless sort of foreign policy that truly endangers Israel. We ought to be saying Israel should be the model for your societies. It's a democracy. It's not a perfect one, there aren't any, but it is a democracy. It has freedom for individuals. It has all of the things that we think of as being important, certainly in our own society. And why don't you have them rather than, again, in descending into terrorism, why not turn around and go this other way?
Dr. Steele, we may have time for one more question, and we'll take that one. Are there any other students who would like to ask a question before we are through? Let's take yours, and then we'll come back to yours for the final one.
Dr. Steele, watching the prior acts within our country, beginning from Jimmy Carter and on to Reagan's 8 years, then Bush, then Clinton, and again Bush, there was an apparent strong desire by all those administrations to lead us into new era of globalization, global trade, global economy. So we watched, and I have read quite a bit, that many levels of promoting that type of level over the decades have taken place. And that really, implementation of that plan really was accelerated quite a bit until the last election. In the last election, there was change echoing throughout the country, changes promised. And many believe that those changes were really a massive departure of globalization and world trade and global economics, changing to more isolation of America. My question to you is it current administration, in your opinion, this change being implemented? And if so, do we see any evidence that the current administration is departing from the prior policies of the prior administrations?
That's a good question. Again, I wish the president himself would be clearer and about what he longs for, what he wants. Because I'm in a position now of having to sort of almost read tea leaves. Their thinking is kind of meager. There's not much there. But what I do know is that he does not believe very much in American exceptionalism. He again has this moral equivalency sort of ethic that he follows. So he seems to want a nation that kind of recedes, that just sort of takes its place like one of these name tags that side by side with other